Hey everybody, Pastor Eric here. Welcome to this week's edition of baseCAMP. If you're new at Summit, which Dr. Sean, you are not new at Summit, but if you are, each week we pause where we were in God's Word and we reflect to where we're going. If you're going up a mountain, you would stop at a base camp on the way up and on the way down. So as we gather at the Summit, in person and online, we pause each week at baseCAMP. This last Sunday, you were there.
I was.
And if you have not watched that message, please catch up on that. We talked about this Christmas series that we're in, the cure for the Christmas sickness. There is a lot of, physical sickness, mental sickness that's existing. And so we're going through a few of those. One of them was hopelessness. And Dr. Sean, I zeroed in on depression and anxiety, worry and fear. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to take a moment. First of all, thank you for joining all of us here on this edition of baseCAMP. If you don't know who Dr. Sean is, he's been attending Summit for
almost 3 years.
Yeah, almost 3 years. He's a psychologist, a clinical physician. He's a doctor, drives a Nissan.
That's right.
I think so. And just a great leader in the church. He's a gift to the kingdom of God. I love, as a follower of Christ, his perspective, and then as a really clinical physician, his understanding of the human mind. And so I really wanted to just pause and allow him to be able to bring us through just a few of these, what we could say, practical steps.
Yeah, just like little things you can do here and there. Not a whole lot, but hopefully enough to help some people out.
Yeah, I agree. So, Dr. Sean, I know that depression and anxiety is, prevalent. The statistics are there. That's alarming to the raise of it. Can you talk a little bit about how that has affected the world in your perspective in this point in time?
Well, the reality is that, as Pastor Eric mentioned, depression and anxiety is something that's been around for quite some time. And through the stigma of mental health, a lot of people don't really spend too much time dealing with it. And that can come in a variety of different ways. It can come from not even talking about it, not handling it appropriately or managing it appropriately, probably not seeking the appropriate help that you need, or even in some cases, not even going to God for it.
Yeah. I think on Sunday, if I remember right, in my notes, going to see a counselor, like a person like yourself, isn't what's wrong with you, it's what's right with you.
Right.
And if you got physically wounded, it's not strange for us to go to the hospital if we got our arm caught in a car door, God forbid, a Nissan. But it would be, I think people, when they have the wounds of their mind, it's almost like it's strange for us to go ask for that help.
Right.
And we have to remove that. So here at Summit, we want to continue to speak to those things. Can you just frame in a little bit about depression and anxiety from your definition?
Okay, so little disclosure, everything I'm about to tell everybody right now is just more of a snapshot point of view, not a comprehensive list. So just keep that in mind. Okay. If you are interested in something more comprehensive, feel free to reach out anytime. So as far as depression goes, that can be in the form of, someone probably having a low amount of energy or fatigue, feelings of worthlessness or helplessness, issues with concentration and or memory, feeling indecisive about your decision making, too much sleep or not enough sleep, otherwise known as insomnia, having a low self-esteem about yourself, and maybe even, in worst case scenario, thoughts of death and or suicide.
Yeah, and so when you're looking at some of these symptoms that would lead you to ask that question, are we dealing with this? What about just overall anxious or anxiety thoughts, an overview from your perspective?
So anxiety is probably like another form that's can be encompassed from a lot of different ways, such as in the form of someone maybe feeling afraid of something or someone all the time, nervousness, restlessness, having nightmares about stuff, depending upon how often they happen, excessive worry, panic attacks, and maybe just feeling irritable and all, kind of keyed up all the time.
Yeah, so these are just some, indicators, like symptomatic indicators.
Stuff that we look for is to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, so if you have been, dealing with that non-exhaustive list, it would be probably important to take those next steps.
Right.
Who does this affect, by the way?
Well, the reality is that much like various amounts of mental health issues, they can affect anybody at some point or another in all of our lives. But what makes them distressing is when they can happen, is when they either happen all the time or more often than not. So, and a lot of these different various mental health conditions have various causes, and they differ for each person. So they can be more situational, as like caused by a certain event or events that happen in someone's life. There could be a genetic component in which someone's just born with it, which tends to happen more often than we think it does. It can affect people of all ages, including children. And I know there's a lot of that stereotype out there that kids are just like little adults, which is absolutely not true. The thing about mental health with children is that may not have the necessary skills or know-how like an adult may have to be able to handle it.
Right.
But just because a person is at a certain age doesn't necessarily mean that they have all the answers with what to do. So that's something to keep in mind. They can also happen at different transitions in a person's life. Let's say, for example, transitioning into high school, transitioning into college, transitioning to, let's say, having like a 9-to-5 job, if you will, as opposed to like always working nights. And as well as these different conditions can have an effect on our performance in a variety of different ways in various parts of our life, such as relationships with other people, how we do our jobs, how well we think we're doing about things, as well as it depends on the person as well, their own individual vulnerabilities, whether it be situational or genetic.
Right. I have seen it affect the wide range of people, class, gender. We could even start to delineate into race. I mean, it affects everybody.
Right.
If you are a human that is breathing oxygen, you are vulnerable to worry, to fear, to this monster that it grows into when it comes to depression and anxiety. I did mention that on Sunday. I know you caught it because I saw you nodding in the back. And in full disclosure, when I was preaching about depression and anxiety here at Summit, I zeroed into Dr. Sean in the back, and as long as I saw him nodding, I just kept going. So that was a good...
So you caught those cues?
Yeah, I did. I picked those up. But I talked about how in anxiety, you mentioned this, that we have to be careful of the amount of information we take in. And I think that we also have to make those new memories when we're talking about trauma. And I was doing a little research on that just after our conversation in the lobby, how the brain actually is rewired, and how you actually physically see these new channels of information, really founded in a new completely space of the brain that's rewiring. Like if you rewired a small little like
a car stereo?
Yeah, or a battery and a light, and it wasn't turning on. Some of these tips that we were talking through is what it's doing is it's just rewiring the brain, which is unbelievable that God made it to do that. The body finds that way as the Spirit directs the path. I love that thought. So there are possibly people, and I know I've dealt with at least 4 or 5 heartbroken phone calls from people in our church after Sunday. Could you just give us some brief tips on maybe what we could do or what someone could do when they start moving into how do I deal with this worry, this fear, this depression, this anxiety?
Absolutely. So again, of course, this is not a comprehensive list. We got to be mindful of people's time, and I don't want to bombard people with too much. But this is just a quick little list of some stuff that I've been doing some research on as to what might be the most helpful for you. Now, you might find some of this stuff helpful, you might not. If you're interested in a more comprehensive list, feel free to reach out and we can talk about it and see if we can find something that is going to work for you. But for right now, let's just focus on a few small things that we could do.
Yeah, let's call this Dr. Sean's super fantabulous list.
I'm going to patent that, by the way.
Okay, good. You can get it at Target. Maybe? No? Okay.
Maybe. I don't know.
All right, here we go.
So one of the things that you could probably do for yourself if you're struggling with any form of mental illness or mental health issue is develop a routine for yourself that's really going to work for you, such as like getting up in the morning at a regular time, going to bed around the same time, and having some type of stable work that you do in between the day. I mean, some people would view stability as just basic rigidity, and to an extent that might be a little bit of rigidity, but we cannot undervalue the nature of what a stable lifestyle can do for people.
Yeah, a ritual, like intentionality and this repeated action.
Right.
And ritual being the path to bringing some wholeness.
Right.
Yeah.
Also keeps the mind from wandering a little bit.
Right, good.
Another tip you can probably do for yourself is getting out of the house or the office for at least half an hour a day just to do something else outside of the norm. It's like go for a walk, go for a drive, go for a bike ride, maybe even read a book of the Bible you probably haven't read before. Like in our soap readings, we just read the book of Nehemiah, and I had never read that book before, and I actually found it pretty interesting. With the whole quarantine thing, you do want to be mindful, but if you take a drive around town just to do something, nothing wrong with that. Couple other things you can probably do for yourself is make sure you're eating right and eating at regular times. And when I say eat, I mean real food, not junk food. I'm looking at you, young adults. Stay away from McDonald's.
Yeah, actually, what you don't know about Dr. Sean is he's actually a really great chef, cook as well. In your previous life, before as you were journeyed to be a clinical physician, I think you were actually on staff at a restaurant cooking food for your job.
I got the burns to prove it.
Yep, that's right, baby.
A couple other tips you might want to think about. Make sure to watch what goes through your mind and what you're thinking about. Or another way to look at it is make sure you're paying attention and thinking about what you're thinking, because it's no secret that if you're constantly thinking negative, you're probably feeling negative, because our thoughts do have an impact on what we feel. I mean, that's just one of those connections that's never going to go away.
Yeah, the word talks about taking every thought captive.
Exactly.
And really being self-aware about that. I call it the soundtrack of the mind. Right. That repetitive internal speaking voice. You're going to listen to the one that's the voice of negativity or the voice of truth. We get to choose in that moment. Yeah, that's huge.
Another couple things to consider, spend some positive time with your family members, and as well as reach out to friends outside of your family. And when you are spending time with people, quarantined or not, or however that looks for you, make sure to always, always, always be patient with yourself and be patient with other people. When you spend a lot of time cooped up inside, whether it be quarantine or whatnot, it can make people a bit irritable and grouchy. And this kind of does fall in line with what's said in Matthew chapter 22, verse 39, love thy neighbor. And as we know, if you're talking about anybody else besides yourself, that is your neighbor, whether it be a spouse, your kid, your actual neighbor, or just someone sitting next to you in a pew in church. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, spending time with others, being patient, cooped up. That reminds me of all the people that are doing distance learning with their kids right now. That's tough on them. Yeah. So love your neighbor, which happens to be your children. Anyways.
Another little tip that you want to maybe take into consideration: seek professional help when you find yourself a bit too overwhelmed, or if you feel like you can't manage what's going on.
Yeah.
No shame in that whatsoever. And it does say in the book of Proverbs, chapter 12, verse 25, anxiety is something that's just going to wear you down, but a helping hand is what's going to help lift you up. And if you need to seek that extra help from an actual professional, no shame in that at all.
No, that's nothing wrong with that. And then I think I love this last piece probably the most is asking God. One of the things that we talked about just briefly is asking God to renew that mind.
Right.
Is there a specific prayer that you have seen? Is there something that you've seen God do a miracle in somebody's life before in this way?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I know something that's helped for me over the course of many, many years is just that continued prayer and praying to receive that healing from God. Pray that God will help resolve the issue that's revolving around your depression or anxiety or anything else mental health going on, as well as also praying for other people who might be suffering for the same thing. Because as you went into the prevalence of it this past Sunday, I think it's pretty clear that this is not an isolated incident. These kind of stuff can happen to anybody at any time, so you're not alone. And it's important that not only we seek the help from others, but also pray that people get the help that they need if that's what's going on.
Yeah, and that's so important because I think when we're dealing with these issues, especially from a person of faith, a pastor, a theological sort of distinctive, I think sometimes we approach mental health as just a prayer, but sometimes it's not just a pill either.
Right.
Because of the way that we're made, we're a spirit, soul, and a body, and the body can trigger things in the mind, and the mind can battle with the spirit, and we can just see these interplays crossing really in a way that can be detrimental if we only focus on one part of the person.
Right.
So part of the reason I wanted to bring you here is to help balance that approach as we look at how God made us, how He created us, to be able to take each one of those aspects in account so we can find the wholeness that in John 10:10, that life abundant in body, spirit, and soul that God has for every single one of us. And if you are a follower of Christ, I'll just say this, two things. You quoted Proverbs 12. And I actually have this highlighted here in the Bible here, Proverbs 12:25. Anxiety weighs down the heart, but a kind word cheers it up.
Amen.
So reach out to somebody this week and give them a kind word, and it will cheer them up. The other thing I want you to know, Summit Church, if you are dealing with anxiety or depression, worry, or fear, you're 100% normal.
Absolutely.
It's one of those places where there is nothing wrong with you. There are things that God can make right in you, but it's part of the human experience. And King David writes in Psalm 22, and then in Psalm 23. So our homework today, my homework for you, Dr. Sean, and for everybody here at baseCAMP, is to read Psalm 22 and read Psalm 23. And ask yourself, is the, roller coaster emotion a part of the human experience? We're going to have ups, we're going to have downs, but God is faithful in all of it.
Absolutely.
So, hey, listen, thank you for extending your time today at baseCAMP. This was a longer than normal baseCAMP, but this is an important issue to you. It's an important issue to me, and I believe that this is something that God truly cares about in every one of our lives, the wholeness that we all can journey to and journey from. Paradoxically, is so interesting how God makes all things new. So this week we're going to be talking about at the summit, the cure for this Christmas sickness. I'm zeroing in on loneliness. And what I am so excited is just to really show in the Word how the early church combated this, how Christ Himself experienced this, and then just sort of bring some light to the fact that you can be in a crowd of 5,000 people, not alone, but yet still lonely.
Right.
And I believe we are in the most connected time in history, but the most devoid.
Facebook, Twitter, you name it.
Yeah, we're the most devoid of actual human relationships. So we'll talk about that here at the summit. Dr. Sean, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I so much appreciate your voice in this church and in the kingdom, as well as your practice and the people that you impact. It makes a difference, man.
Thank you.
Thanks for dedicating your life to it. God bless y'all. We'll see you at the summit.
Have a good week.